I'm so very excited to be here. All of you folks look absolutely amazing. We have a bunch of presenters today, so we are going to go right ahead and get right into this process. But I'm glad you're all here. No doubt we will have some more folks joining us as we go along. So the folks who are presenting today are students from my communication research methods class over several of the previous semesters, and so they're going to be presenting their research that they did as part of our class. So I'm very excited to have our presenters here today. And our first presenter, and actually before I mention who our first presenter is, I'm going to say, if you have questions, because we have so many folks presenting, I'll ask that you save your questions until after all of the presenters. And also I have to say that Stephanie is unfortunately not able to join us today because of a scheduling conflict, but she is here in spirit, and if anybody wants a copy of her paper, I'm sure she'll be happy to have me send it to you so you can let me know. So thank you. And without further ado, our first presenter is Yari Bayaz. Bayaz, sorry. And with the presentation, you've changed analyzing communication over time between social media influencers and their audience.
Hello, everyone. So this is my study called You've Changed, Analyzing the Change in Communication Between Social Media Influencers and Their Audience in Comparison to the Beginning of Their Career. So basically, I wanted to study if that narrative was true on whether or not you've gotten too big, you forgot where you came from. I wanted to see if that was true with social media influencers and their audience. So I took an objectivist perspective in this study. So I hypothesized that as social media influencers become more mainstream, the ability to connect with their audience personally decreases. And yeah, I just wanted to see if that was true. But before I could conduct any research of my own, I had to look at those who came before me. So I basically did a research, and the previous research fell into one of these three categories. The journey to fame, which is basically what makes an influencer successful, what makes them so influential, if you will. Parasocial relationships, which is probably the first thing that comes to our mind when we think of social media influencers, and how they're created and maintained. And lastly, commercialization. So the brand deals, the sponsorships, things that you see in a social media influencer's profile. However, the big gap that was missing here was what happens once they've reached that success. Everyone kind of looked at what makes them tick, but no one looked at the after. So that's what I came in here for. So to study influencers, get this, I needed influencers. So I chose 3 influencers because if I only did it once, it wouldn't be reliable. If I did it twice, it could be a fluke. Did it 3 times, it's just right, to quote Goldilocks. And I chose lifestyle influencers because they would be more inclined to share about their lives. On Instagram because it's the most utilized social media platform for influencers according to the study that I cited here. And they had to have 100,000 to 500,000 followers. I am but a girl. I am not going to sit through a million comments, but we'll get to that in a second. 8 years minimum on Instagram just to have a clear cut waypoint of the beginning of their career. So the first 4 years is the beginning of their career, and the later 4 years are the most recent. And last, they must have gained fame on Instagram and or social media. So no actors or athletes or any type of other career that they're using social media to boost that career. They had to have a career solely on Instagram or social media. These are our influencers. For the purpose of this study, we will know them as influencers S, L, and A. Don't need to know their names. It's not what we're here for. So for this quantitative content analysis, I made a spreadsheet to act as a coding system. I turned to the most common form of communication on social media, which is comments. For the purpose of this study, just to make sure we're all on the same page, when I say comments, I mean threads. So threads equals comments, and it's coming from the user's perspective. And when I say replies, it's coming from the influencer's perspective. So I scored these influencers on how they reply to threads to measure personalness. So that's what I had to define. I had to define what is personal in the context of this study. I needed 10 posts from the beginning of their career and 10 posts from the most recent. So what I did was a little convoluted, so I'll go slow for here. I went through all of their posts from each period, and the first thread that the influencer replied to would be added to my spreadsheet. Then I would move on to the next post until I had 10 from each period. We're following here, we're good? Cool. This is said spreadsheet, it's a little hard to see, but the next slide will show you guys a little bit more in detail. So each influencer would get a point for each. if they used an emoji, if they thanked a user, you answered a question, referred to the thread in a way unique to the thread, provided additional information, used a pet name, and lastly, if they replied a second time to the same thread. And I didn't want to penalize any of the influencers in case they didn't get a question asked of them because it would kind of interfere with the results. So they would automatically get a point if no question was asked. This is the coding system all filled out. I know it's scary. Don't worry, I did the hard part already. Just you need to know that green is old and new is blue. Here are the results. Influencer S had a nice 2.9 for her older replies and went down to a 2.3. So yay, my hypothesis is correct so far. So let's look over to Influencer O. Influencer L stayed the same. Lovely, my hypothesis loved that. But Influencer L stayed the same at 2.6 for both her older and newer replies. So remember what I said? If I did it once, it would be unreliable. 2 could be a fluke. So now let's move on to see if Influencer L will act as a tiebreaker. And she did. So Influencer A had a 3.6 for her older replies and a 2.8 for her newer replies, which was the most drastic drop at a 0.8. But she still had a high score for her older replies, so there was a lot to be discussed here. It was a smaller study. I only had a semester to do it, and I was just one person, so more could be done. I would have used more influencers, had more threads to look at, maybe even recruited someone else to look at them with me. Probably not a friend because they wouldn't want to be my friend after that. And the study and the results themselves show that users like me often forget that there's someone behind that screen. And it sounds so cliche, I know. But it's nice to get a reminder that there's someone on the other side communicating with you, especially in an age where everything has been so digital and digitalized. Second, it also shows a way that influencers maintain parasocial relationships, because a lot of the previous research mainly focused on the visual appeal of influencers instead of actually speaking on what the influencers did to maintain those parasocial relationships, whether they wanted to or not. And lastly, it starts a much needed conversation about personal interactions between influencers and users. I think we can all think back to an influencer who's gotten a little too personal with their audience. I'm sure everyone has someone in mind right now, but this can discuss the pros and cons, if you will. This study builds a foundation of a conversation that can be had. How close is too close to your audience? In conclusion, this study has sparked a newfound passion for communication research that I cannot wait to continue honing those skills and seeing how I grow in this field. So thank you. The next, I don't know who's next.
Excellent. Yep. And while our next presenters are going to be pulling up their presentation, I want us to give Yari another round of applause for going first. Very appreciated. And our next presenters, Isabella Crawford and Jake Mooney, conducted this study actually beyond the confines of my communication research class. They actually did this, so I have to correct myself, they did this as part of their Mellon Transfer Fellowship project working with me on an independent study. And so that was their research kind of context for this, was an independent study rather than our class. So, and they worked together on that project, and their project is titled Prager's Post-Truth Pedagogy, a Burkean analysis of PragerU content. Mm-hmm. So they will be started once they're ready. There we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Feeling good? All right. So, Prager's Post-Truth Pedagogy, a Burkean analysis of PragerU kids content. So, to start, what is PragerU? PragerU is a conservative nonprofit organization founded by Brooklyn College alumnus Dennis Prager in 2009. It was referred to as the Prager University Foundation. And they really care about Judeo-Christian values, which they then call American values. And while they didn't gain too much traction in their beginning, 2015 saw them rebrand as PragerU and kind of like modernize their whole brand, with the 2016 election being where they gained the most traction with their video on the Electoral College receiving over 50 million views. And this really put them in the mainstream as like, oh, they're modernizing conservative points and just like and they positioned themselves as very, I guess, worthy alternative to the leftist lies, which you'll see in our study. In 2021, PragerU Kids was launched in an effort to provide an alternative to the critical race theory being taught in public schools. And 2023 is where we started our research, with Florida becoming the first state to implement this content in kindergarten to sixth grade. And here's Dennis Prager, and there's like a little animated avatar of himself that's kind of like one of the mascots of PragerU Kids.
When designing our study, we decided to study two different types of content. So the first category is meta content, which refers to content that discusses their content itself, which includes marketing, promotional materials. The first artifact there, the Parent Action Guide, is part of their PragerU resources for educators and parents, which consists of advice and information on how to speak to your educational board about stopping bias in education. And the other one is the 2023 annual report, which is the end of year recap of the content that they've made and achievements that they had throughout the organization.
Yeah. And then with educational content, we honed in on the 3rd to 5th grade animated series, Leo and Layla's History Adventures. This one, there had actually been some examples that have gone a little more mainstream because of the content in there, and because of that, we thought it would be a great place to start. And this content is very important because in this post-truth age where you can believe anything, you can find an answer to anything, PragerU wants to position themselves as like a legitimate alternative to bias, to corruption, stuff like that.
For our methodology, we decided to choose rhetorical analysts, more specifically Burkean analysis, his theory of dramatism, and of course more specifically the dramatistic pentad is meant to explain hidden intentions throughout a narrative. And as seen here, we have the act for what, the agency for why, the scene for when, the purpose for why, and then the agent for who, and essentially you apply the information to this and you can highlight, what's going on in the sense of a story. And we decided to choose this specific form of rhetorical analysis because there were a lot of narratives present in the artifacts we chose when it came to the marketing promotion strategy, and then also the storytelling itself in the children's content. And so we decided this would be best to try and extract their information and kind of understand what they were trying to communicate. So for results, it became clear that there were two different narratives, and mostly the first artifact, the 2023 annual guide, where it depicted PragerU as the hero and then the left as the villain that was creating this environment of indoctrination and domination on our educational system. And then to explain more of how we applied the pentad, on the right is a screenshot of our document for the act aspect, and basically we looked for textual evidence that would answer the question of what is happening, and then we were able to summarize all the information that we had into the table.
So next we did the same process with educational content, but we actually analyzed the educational videos. So we did one on Marie Curie, Distinguished Mother and Scientist, one on Christopher Columbus, Explorer of the New World, and one on Frederick Douglass, the Outspoken Abolitionist. Within the three contexts we first did in the video itself, the episode as part of a PragerU content library, and then the episode as a piece of educational curriculum material. So one thing we really discovered, especially with the second context, is PragerU uses historical figures as a sort of avatar to voice certain points. So for example, in the Frederick Douglass one, an animated Frederick Douglass says that to create change, you have to work within the confines of the system. I'm sure some of you may have seen an animated Christopher Columbus saying, "Isn't it better that people were enslaved instead of killed?" That one was pretty popular. So we see here that PragerU is using these famous or infamous historical figures to kind of indoctrinate students, for lack of a better word. Like you can see here, Frederick Douglass is an avatar saying, if you want to create change, do it inside the system. And this is during the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020 through 2023. So it's very intentional what they're doing.
So for our discussion, for the meta content, The two narratives, especially in the 2023 annual report, interacted with each other. Like I said, the left's evils actions kind of created this need for PragerU to come in and educate children. And despite referencing the left 24 times in this document, there is no explanation as to who exactly the left is, how they assume this complete domination of the educational system, and why they are pushing the values that they are. And when you compare this to the Parent Action Guide, um, sorry, um, in that it was clearly expressing that an issue was bias in our education. And so when you compare those two narratives, it clashes because you're claiming that there's an issue with the bias in our education, but then you're asserting that your own content, which clearly has some political influence or values that they're holding on to, it is not free of bias. So both of those ideas contradicting each other, but still coexisting, is to their benefit as it creates a multifaceted ethos that can appeal to a wider audience.
Yeah, so this is kind of like creating content for conservative counterculture in a way. So when you consume these things, like already PragerU positions themselves a certain way that we're the truth tellers in this post-truth warlike landscape. We're the ones who are going to give you the truth. Now that is on alone, it's like is an issue, but when you're putting it in an educational institution, children don't know like that there's other content to browse. They see this and they just take it. Sure, like maybe in like 15, 20 years they may unlearn some of it. The damage that is being done at such a young age cannot be overstated. Like this is really creating like the next generation of like neoconservatives, and that is not something we should be having in our education that's supposed to be nonpartisan. So this agenda setting disguised as critical thinking is a very important issue because these supposed anti-establishment ideals are becoming institutionalized, and we're basically kind of saying that not only is there like we're kind of egging on this idea of a counterculture that doesn't really exist, but they're also giving it to our children. So they're telling our children like the media landscape is not to be trusted except for us. But in the same token, they say the left is this, the left is that, without even naming them. And yeah, we just want to thank you for your time. Do you want to say anything else? Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Our next presenter is going to be coming down and setting up his slide deck. I just want to say thank you to folks for coming in. I'm going to just peek outside and see if there's other people who want to come in between presenters. Excellent. So I am so grateful for our presenters today and for everybody who's here. We have yet another amazing presenter, Eden Lawrence, who is going to be presenting negative in-game messaging faced by women in gaming. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. As stated earlier, my name is Eden Lawrence. Gaming is a hobby that I partake in pretty often. It's a very popular hobby, and most importantly, it is a gender-neutral hobby. However, because of the assumed identity of gamers everywhere being male, this subjects women to torment and abuse, and that's what I wanted to study for my research. So like stated earlier, because the assumed gender identity being male, women have become easy targets in the gaming sphere because they are seen as a minority. It's important to highlight these issues because many women don't feel safe in a space that should be open to everyone. Many women are being faced with sexual harassment, mental abuse, and other things of that nature that I will get into later. And for a quote, although women comprise roughly half of the American gaming population, they continue to face symbolic violence and harassment that perpetuates the maleness of gaming. So starting off with sexism, this perceived minority status of female gamers is invalid, and this inequity is theorized to be historically rooted in the construction of the gamer identity around the male identity. A lot of video game characters, specifically female ones, tend to serve the purpose of attracting the male gaze. Many of female video game characters are subjected to either tight-fitting clothing or different size or unrealistic size proportions, which will only which will only attract the male gaze. And this sexism dates back into how these consoles were advertised, such as popular console, the Nintendo Game Boy, with many of its ads only having males inside these ads in these commercials. This was perceived as something as only a male hobby. And it's small stuff like that that can separate the female group from gaming. So with mental abuse, the mental toll that female gamers face for simply existing in this public space can sometimes be a lot to handle. Actions that are taken to avoid these situations are using gender-neutral avatars, not talking in multiplayer games, or leaving the games entirely. It's important to note that these are just avoidance styles. A lot of punishment that gamers face for abusing female gamers are mainly very minute. The most punishment that these people can face is a ban to their accounts, which they can just make a new one, and the cycle continues. With sexual harassment, this can include, but is not limited to, the distribution of non-consensual porn, sexist trolling, or threats of rape. While in-game attacks are still to be expected, many notable female gamers have been victims to deepfake pornography. This is mainly for many notable female game streamers. This is obviously a huge invasion of privacy and can cause body dysmorphia or even PTSD. So with my study, I took an interpretive view, and I wanted to do a qualitative survey. I mainly wanted to do a qualitative survey because in my analysis of all the different articles that talked about this issue, they were mainly quantitative. And while that was obviously good for them, I wanted to have a more human approach. I wanted to allow people to talk about their experiences and not really make them feel like a number. What I did was I hung up QR flyers up in every building in Brooklyn College. However, these were only hung up for about 3 to 4 days, which I will talk about in my limitations. So with my responses, I got 28 total responses, 16 male, 6 women, and 6 non-binary. It's a very small sample size for this, which again, another limitation that I'll get into. The main things that I asked were about gender differences, using a character that didn't match the gamer's gender, microphone usage while solo queuing, being made uncomfortable by teammates, and the best and worst situation where gender played a role. So for characters that did not match the gamer's gender, many of the males that said that they do use female characters, they are mainly for aesthetic purposes or maybe storyline purposes. However, for the female gamers, they didn't feel like the woman characters that were available to them were aesthetically pleasing, which goes into what I said earlier about a lot of the characters only being made for male gaze. With microphone usage and solo queuing is a term where it's mainly in multiplayer games where you allow the game's matchmaking system to pair you up with teammates. A lot of females reported that they do not use their mics while gaming because it makes them uncomfortable, especially if a majority of their teammates are male. Being made uncomfortable by teammates, a lot of the male participants, they said that the main thing that makes them uncomfortable, or a lot of the things that make them uncomfortable, do have to deal with either racism or trolling. However, one notable aspect that was left out from the males that weren't left out from female responses were sexual remarks. And the best and worst situations where gender played a role, both involved female gamers. A lot of female gamers said that their best experience were obviously when they were gaming with other women. For the male counterparts, they said that their best experiences were when lobbies just weren't toxic. No one was toxic to each other, especially if a woman was present in the gaming lobby. So with my limitations, I obviously had some time constraints. My QR flyers were only up for about 3 to 4 days, and it wasn't in a great weekend. It was during about Thanksgiving weekend, so pretty unfortunate on that part. Uh, for future research, I would hope to do interviews because a lot of the questions that I asked, while I did leave them space to answer a lot, they would put very small answers, and a lot of the answers would be sometimes or often, so I had to eliminate those answers so I can just leave for the definite ones, and the imbalance of gender in participants. That's another thing that interviews would help with. I would obviously search for either 10 female gamers, 10 male gamers, or 5 female gamers, 5 male gamers, a nice equal balance, so I can have a easier time to compare and contrast. So for discussion and conclusion, it is a woman who faced the forefront of toxicity while simultaneously being seen as the minority of the group, and this is something that I hope to bring awareness to. This is a hobby that I do enjoy. However, I don't enjoy the fact that many women are subjected to abuse while doing it. This is a gender neutral activity, and I believe that everyone should enjoy it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eden, for that great presentation. Thank you all for coming again. And while Patrick is getting ready, I'll let you just know a little bit about the project that the students do in the class. And basically, from start to finish in the semester, they start their own. They come up with their own theory or research question, and then they have to um, go from there to go through all the stages of that research process, pitching it to me, getting it approved, doing the literature review related to that topic, and so forth. And it is a very intensive process for all the students. So I am so grateful for all of our presenters here. Right now, our presenter is Patrick Leon, and he's going to be talking about the concept of toxic masculinity in focus, understanding, addressing, and overcoming.
Thank you, Professor. Appreciate you. Thank you, everybody. I just want to say thank you, Professor, and thank you to the faculty and staff for having me. All right, so the concept of toxic masculinity in focus, understanding, addressing, and overcoming by me. Topics that will include is the historical roots, mental health, media, masculine, and education. Why am I covering this topic? What is the concept of toxic masculinity? A question that I disagreed with when I first started doing my literature review. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think the whole thing existed because my ego wouldn't let me, that's just what it is. But my literature review will explain why it has come about and what can we do to educate ourselves to make a better world. Upon my research, I wanted to make a persuasive and compelling explanation on why this research is important. I could focus on the history, the cultural factors, and what contributed to the development of harmful norms. In my research, I had to explore why toxic masculinity exists. It is the result of ingrained societal expectations and norms surrounding the traditional gender roles, particularly those associated with men. Here's a clear argument on why the concept of toxic masculinity exists. The textbook definition of toxic masculinity is a group of beliefs and behavior that are stereotypically linked to an expected behaviors of men and that are thought to be detrimental to both men and society at large. The destructive messages associated with toxic masculinity can lead to men feeling entitled and engage in violence against women. I'm going to go on with my first topic is historical roots. Throughout much of history, societies have prescribed specific roles and behaviors for men and women. These roles are often idealized traits such as strength, dominance, aggression, and emotional stoicism for men, while valuing nurturing, empathy, and passivity for women. These rigid roles laid the groundwork for toxic masculinity by promoting certain behaviors as inherently masculine and reinforcing the notion that the deviation from these norms is unacceptable. I'm going to go with mental health. As I stated before, men's freedom to express themselves and follow hobbies that don't fit the categories can be restricted by the expectations that they will conform to traditional male gender norms. Toxic masculinity can also impact men's relationships, both romantic and platonic. The emphasis on dominance and control can lead to interpersonal conflict and difficulty forming meaningful connections. Men who adhere to toxic masculine norms may struggle to communicate effectively, leading to strained relationships and increased feelings of loneliness and isolated, which can negatively impact mental health. I also wanted to touch base on media. The portrayal of masculinity in media and popular culture has played a significant role in perpetuating toxic stereotypes. From action heroes to solve problems through violence, to advertisement that equate masculinity with physical strength and sexual prowess, media represents often reinforce harmful ideas of manhood. And I wanted to also go to masculinity. It's also crucial to remember that not every masculine expression is harmful. Empathy, emotional intelligence, and self-other respect are qualities of a healthy man. When cultural norms about what it means to be a male becomes destructive and constructive, toxic masculinity emerges, which results in actions and viewpoints that support injustice, violence, and other desirable outcomes. And I want to say, last but not least, take time to reflect your own experiences with masculinity and how they have may influence societal expectations. Consider how these experiences have shaped your beliefs and behaviors towards yourself and others. Engage in open, honest conversations with friends, family, and colleagues about toxic masculinity. And I also wanted to share what I've also learned and listen to other perspectives and discuss ways to dismantle harmful gender norms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for your presentation, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness with which you went through all of those. Patrick, of all the students in my classes in research methods, he was the only student who ended up doing the exact opposite that he pitched to me originally in several semesters of teaching this. He said, I'm going to do this project, and then as he pursued it, he was like, I'm entirely wrong about this. So I'm going to look at this entirely differently than I did a month ago, which is really impressive. A lot of students who take the research methods course end up starting with the same ideas that they finish with. And so I applaud you for that. So our next presenter is Sabrina Vahobova, Sabrina Vahobova, who's going to be talking about the role traditional cultural values play in a person's willingness to seek mental health counseling.
Wow, this is a lot more eyeballs than I expected. Where were you guys yesterday? So, as Professor Carrillo said, my topic was to examine the roles of traditional cultural values and how that would impact a person's willingness to seek out mental health counseling. The reason why I decided to do this study was because your communication skills develop, in your own home. And through that, you perceive the world in a way that allows you to seek out help, ask questions, learn, etc. And for me, in my personal experience as a first-generation immigrant, college student, in my family, the topic of mental health was non-existent. So I wanted to do my research on this topic and seek out if my experience can be found in other people as well. So obviously I had to do a literature review. I had to find resources and see what other studies have done in the past. I came across 3 different types of themes, and one of them was traditional values. Where did they come from? How did they develop? And I found out that traditional values, they typically are found in the home. They develop as a result of where you grew up, where your parents have grown up, and what they've been exposed to. One of the resources that I found was that Chinese immigrants, they're groups of people who have a religion in Confucianism, and Confucianism is set in that traditional of putting the families over the individual. Moving onwards, and the traditional values therefore develop a person's cultural identity, and this, as they go out into the world, right? This transfers over to how they deal with their relationships, their work, and if they're moving from one place to another, they have to assimilate to the cultures around there. But for immigrants, it's a different case where they stick to their own. Oh, shoot, what happened? Sorry. So, let me go here. So there's a lot of stigma around mental health, right? And one of the resources that I found was that stigma occurs when elements of labeling, stereotyping, separation, status loss, and discrimination co-occur in a power situation. Based on these kinds of labelings, people can develop those stigmatizing views, and that could either be in the view of like social stigma or self stigma, or sometimes people are also exposed to media, which is, I'm pretty sure everybody has social media or have access to the internet. So based on that, in terms of like social stigma is defined to be a type of social disapproval of individual beliefs or characteristics that are not acceptable by cultural norms. And self-stigma is like the stigma that you have inside as a result of what you've been exposed to, whether that's in your home where as an immigrant growing up, you deal with traditional values, and those values don't have any like correlation to mental health or in any way. So moving forward, the method that I decided to go for was qualitative, and which was interesting because a lot of the sources that I found were actually quantitative, meaning that they dealt with surveys and in like a not what how do you call it? It wasn't like face-based. It was just focusing more on the quantitative aspects, statistics, and analyzing media sources, stuff like that. But I wanted to do interviews. I did interviews and I found my interviews through familiar people, use my network. So I found 3 people, 3 first-generation college students who were either still in school or already graduated or whatnot. And basically, I set up these interviews and asked them questions based on how if they have ever like sought out mental health counseling, or if they how does their life at home impacted the way that they sought out, if they had sought out help at all. And the results were very interesting, actually, because there were three things that I'm going to mention first. So the participants found it difficult to speak about mental health to their families, and the participants also wished to use or had used media, like social media, not social media, I'm so sorry. They use media to look up, ways of coping, mental health terminology, etc. And they also felt that developing a connection with others through shared experiences helped them with their mental health a lot more than, trying to seek out. I mean, the thing is, they didn't really go into how their culture impacted their willingness to seek out mental health counseling, because they had like sources already from school, from media, etc. So they didn't really say anything. And also, I feel like one of the limitations of my research study was because my interview questions fell short, and I didn't get the chance to ask them what their culture was like and how they grew up in the country that they were from compared to the country that they are in right now. So that could have been, one thing I could have done better. And so for future research, I thought what would be a great addition would be to expand the population, because there are people who never got the chance to seek out a higher education. For example, immigrant parents, my parents, people who came here and just immediately started working. I thought that would be a great addition to learn about their experiences and their thoughts, despite all that. So overall, yeah, I don't think my question was really answered, but if I were to do it again, I would definitely try to change up my questions and get more people involved, because I didn't have much time to do this. So yeah, that's it. Follow us on BC Thinkers.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Really appreciate the presentation, and thank you so much for all of our presenters. Let's give them another round of applause. I'll open up to questions in just a moment, but I did want to just take a second to really draw attention to the diversity of the presentations that were given, so different methods that were used, qualitative surveys, quantitative surveys, interviews, content analysis, all kinds of different methodologies that my students used in this course, as well as all different groups that were studied, politicians and influencers and immigrants and female gamers and so forth. So lots of different, completely different populations, as well as even the way they're presented their research. So I'm very grateful to the ingenuity and stick-to-itiveness of these students. There are many students in this room right now who are doing this right now. So they're working on their project this semester, so you can see what in the end it will look like for all of you. Again, I'm so grateful for you to be here. We do have time, so I would love to open it up to questions for our wonderful presenters. So I'm wondering, can we have all the presenters come up? Yeah, if all of our wonderful presenters can come up again. And then if anybody has questions, I don't know if anybody's monitoring the chat on the Zoom. No. Oh, okay. share the mic.
First of all, you guys did really good for your presentations. And I had a question for Eden. So I wanted to know, like, what type of games were you referring to, and what type of games do you play?
I'll get the message. Oh, no, you can't.
Okay, so for the most played games, I actually did. I had a question for that. So the most played games were mainly first-person shooter games, RPG games, and story-based games. Those were the top three. Um, and the top three games overall were Call of Duty, Pokemon, and something else I don't remember. I'd have to look over. But personally, I'm a fan of first-person shooter games and story-based games that I play, and also some life simulation games.
Who else? Somebody else over here? Getting my steps in today. I feel like I'm on Oprah.
So all of you did incredible. I loved all the presentations, but my question is actually for Yari. How did you go about like actually picking the influencers that you chose? Like, was it more about convenience, or was there a specific process you followed?
So they had to fit the criteria, like lifestyle, having a certain amount of followers. And I mainly just, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I'm gonna be very honest. I looked up influencers on Google, and then what if they gave me like a list of like, oh, lifestyle influencers, and then I just looked through, and there are I saved it on my Instagram. You guys know the save feature where you save the post. I have like some influencers that are completely scrapped because I found that they weren't responding enough to the threads. So it was literally just trial and error and looking it up on Google. I know, so insightful. But the moral of the story, Google. Woo, Google.
I got the power now. Oh my god. Sorry. This is for Pat. So I was wondering, like, what was your original like pitch for that you gave to your teacher?
That's a good question. How I went about it, the original pitch was for my idea, toxic masculinity. It was kind of like more like I didn't think it'd exist. I thought it was kind of like, oh, it was just something to like tell guys to like, oh, stop being men, or just I guess I wanted to. My original pitch was just more so like I didn't think it existed. That's just where I was coming from. But like as I did my research, I was like, oh, this is what I didn't think it would be as expected. If that ain't make sense. So yeah. So that's just how I didn't think it existed at first. So yeah.
Great job, guys. I'm so sorry I forgot your guys' names, but yes, I want to know why, like, what inspired you to want to research PragerU, and I want to know, like, it died. Oh no, it's back. I want to know your like actual opinions on the entire concept, like, be honest.
Hate him. I think he's dumb. And he went here, so we all have to like collectively fix that. But I think we were both really interested in PragerU. We actually both took a media literacy class the year before we did this project, and that was really insightful. But I think we both just have like this, like, my mom is actually a member of the conspiracy group QAnon, so I'm like very into media literacy and like just like how conservatives kind of like manufacture a counterculture. So I was always interested in seeing like where PragerU would go. So yeah, I was just always passionate about it.
Yeah, to add on to that, well, Jake and I knew each other outside of class, and we took Professor Carrillo's communication research class separately. And when I when I did my research project, I did it about whether the amount of aspects in one's Twitter account would correlate to like the dehumanization techniques present in the tweets. And Jake did. We didn't know each other at the time, and he did a different, but it was still on Twitter, a study about analyzing wokeness on Twitter. And so we kind of realized there was this overlap, and we were both really interested in studying both, like analyzing social media, but also political communication amongst groups. And so we were brainstorming, trying to think, what else could we do? And this was when it kind of was first getting implemented by Florida in the Department of Education. And yeah, even since the beginning of that project, it's gone into more and more states. So
Arizona now. It's in Arizona. It's in like Maine, I think. It's in a couple more. So it's definitely like a growing issue. So we wanted to address it like as soon as we could.
yeah.
I just have to give a shout out to both of those students. Jake for presenting, this is a really powerful microphone. Oh. Jake for presenting that wokeness paper last night at the symposium as well. And did a great job with it. And Isa, because she presented her paper at last year's Expo and actually won top prize. Woo!
Great job, guys. You guys did a good job. This question is for Eden. I want to know, because you did say that women do face a lot of toxicity in gaming. I want to know, like, your experiences in facing toxicity in gaming and how do you react to it? Because you did say that you interviewed a lot of people, and not interviewed, but you did ask them questions, and then they did say that the gaming would be more fun with less toxicity in it. So I want to know your experiences facing toxicity and how you react to it.
The report button, honestly. A lot of the toxicity in gaming that I face is racial, which is funny enough because, again, they don't see my face, but there are a lot of usage of racial slurs, which I just use the report button on. A lot of games now are being a lot more, responsive with that. I'll report somebody on Monday, and then I log back on Tuesday, and I see, hey, we got your report. There was action taken for that account, which I do love, because that means that toxicity they're making steps to make toxicity go down, and they're realizing that this is a problem within the community. It's such an inherent problem where people say, oh, well, it's gaming. It's supposed to be toxic. No, it's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be toxic. And so those are just really, my experiences are usually racial in nature.
And then last one is, I know a lot of people, like it's kind of split. Some people think that toxicity makes games more fun. And then you do say that it's not. So what are your thoughts on that? Like people saying that toxicity makes the game more fun, it makes it more competitive.
I think competitiveness and toxicity, two separate things. I don't see how they have to correlate in order to make gaming fun. I don't find toxicity fun because it's just not necessary in gaming. I like to be competitive in games. I've known to rage quite a few times, but that's besides the point. But my rage isn't towards another gamer. My rage is sadly towards my desk more than anything. But I don't believe that toxicity and competitiveness have to be joint for gaming to be fun. I believe that they can be two separate entities, and one has to be abolished in gaming, which is toxicity.
All right, thank you so much.
And you get bonus points for using the word correlation correctly in your answer. It's okay. It's okay. Right,
As I'm a very big mental health advocate for most, it seems that men are more prevalent now to go to therapy and want to work on their problems or work on their trauma or whatever it may be. After doing this research, what have been some things that you've done in your personal life to positively affect your mental health, and maybe some exercises or?
I usually try to write things down and see how I feel about it. I usually talk to other people. I usually talk to like close friends and family. That's how I try to do it. I've been trying to get myself more into therapy, more so. If anybody knows any therapy or counseling I might need, let me know. Holla at me. Yeah. Um, and so, just regular stuff. Listen to music, or I might watch a game, or just stuff that like kind of like gets me like that kind of what's the word I'm trying to look for, like release things and stuff like that. So I usually try to talk about it. Even just talking about it now, it just helps me a lot better, and just try to get my thoughts out there and tell people how I feel about certain things and all that. So
Thank you. Also, one quick note, Brooklyn College actually has a personal counseling center that offers free therapy for all students. There are group workshops, individual workshops. I'm like in my tour guide mode right now, but like genuinely, it's in the basement of James Hall. They offer individual therapy sessions, group sessions, workshops, and it's a very great institution to have. It is like scary to take that step, but it's very much worth it. So therapy can be expensive, but we do have a space here. Just had to make that little PSA.
That was awesome. Just have to say that.
So we're back to me. My next question, oh God, what is it? It's for Eden. I just wanted to ask a little bit about like the solutions, because you had mentioned during your presentation that the primary solution right now and like the worst punishment is banning. Do you see or have heard of any other solutions? Because obviously banning, there's a ringing that is distracting me. Outside of banning, they can't just create a new account. Like, do you see anything that's being done to have a more permanent action or more punishment?
I have seen in some cases where it is banning, but it's VPN based. So if they make an account in that area, then that account cannot be made, especially because of information tracking and stuff like that. I haven't seen anything else besides that, but I do hope to see more, especially because this is such a growing issue.
I know we have another question over here, but I do want to give a shout out that 4 of our presenters are in the Mellon Transfer Fellowship Program or have been in that program. So shout out to that program, which is amazing. So, and it comes with a stipend. So there you go.
$1,200.
There you go.
Yeah, it is a nice stipend.
Okay, so again, I also appreciate the diversity within the research analyses that were done. My question is for Patrick as well, as I'm doing research on more so of like the stigma against men and using skincare, as like I have my license in like aesthetics to study skin, and I also have experience with like working in the beauty industry, and having interactions with couples that will come into Sephora, or that would or males that would just come into Sephora and like completely I want to say like shun the idea of wanting to take care of themselves, and I'm trying to construct a question that can, I guess, go towards the mental health aspect of it, like how or what would make someone who is scared to be isolated in the masculine construct, like what would make them comfortable in, vocalizing that they want to take this step to have a better mental health, or just take care of themselves without having to worry about how they are being viewed. And it's no pressure, because it could be a personal answer as well, like because that can also go towards like a primary source.
What helps me is putting myself out there, talking about it, even though it's a scary situation. Like, this is scary right now, but that helped, putting myself out there and just letting people know that it is okay, especially as a man, to like express your emotions. I think it's very okay to take care of yourself. I feel like for me, my personal masculinity is what you make it. It's how you go about it and how you feel about that. I usually try to take care of myself. I try to get like my hair done every once in a while, or get a manicure, pedicure, or whatever. I just usually try to do things that's gonna be good for for myself. So that's how I usually go about it. Is that best experience?
It is, and I also have like one more like question also, like when it comes to, like you said, putting yourself out there and like just having conversations with, like you mentioned earlier, your close friends or just people that you confide in. When it comes to like speaking about self-care and things like that, like how do those conversations come about, like between you and your friends? Like how does it start, and what makes you vulnerable in that moment to, like, you know, actually open up and not feel judged?
I know it's not the most healthiest, but usually like if something's bothering me, like I usually try to keep it in, which is not the best thing to do. I just, like I said, I try to like talk about it, be like, hey, like I'll call one of my best friends up and be like, hey, this is what I'm going through, and I let him know about that. And usually I just tell myself, like, you know, just give it another day, Pat. You know, it's gonna come through. This too shall pass. You know, and I know I'm just gonna get through it. You know, that's the best way I try to.
So what I'm getting that it's mainly faith-based. Like it's just having hope that, you know, it will be for the greater good and it's not for
It's not for me.
destruction
Yeah.
or isolation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, no problem.
I'm going to hijack the floor for just one question. I want to ask Sabrina, but all of the folks up there, if there's folks in here who are doing their projects this semester, what advice would you have, starting with Sabrina, for the students who are working on their research right now? Maybe just a quick piece of advice from all of you.
I would say use your time wisely because it's very important, especially if you're doing a research paper like this. It's long. You'll have to get lots of resources. You'll have to do lots of reading. So unfortunately, if you don't like reading, get started now.
I want to say just take it bit by bit. The old saying is, "How do you eat an elephant?" Just take it piece by piece, and before you know it, you ate the whole elephant.
I might get crucified for this, but talk to Professor Carrillo like a lot. I think I saw her more in office hours than I saw in the entire semester in class. I would say same thing. I was taking it bit by bit, step by step, because when I was doing my quantitative content analysis, quantitative means the beef of your paper is the method. And the method was the part that took the longest, so you literally just have to go step by step, every minute detail, until you have the bigger picture, because it will come together. But also talk to Professor Carrillo, because all the things that ailed me in my head, she wiped away very easily. And so shout out to you. Thank you so much. But yes, that's pretty much it. Just take it bit by bit, trust the process, trust yourself, and abuse office hours.
I'm going to also echo to talk to your professor. Even if it's something small, I would ask her questions that I kind of already knew how she was going to answer, but I just wanted that confirmation. But also really think ahead about your methods, because for me, I originally wanted to do something more in person. I still wanted to do interviews, but I wanted to be more in person and like approach people. And then I realized I'm terrible at doing that, and so I had to pivot really quickly. So really think ahead about what method you're going to do and how you're going to do it.
I feel like it kind of is a similar topic with like majors. Like when you're choosing a major, people be like, "Oh, there's like these academic ones that are like more useful." I don't think there are any useless topics. Like all I can say is, like if you care about something, if you're interested in it, there is like data on it to research. Like I know like mine was on wokeness, which is like a very political term, but I was just very interested in it. But there have been like a lot of papers, studies. You saw women in gaming for one. Just like you can get really specific with what you want. It doesn't just have to be like this. What do you think is the most like conducive to study, the most like academic? Like I really do think take what you're passionate about and like find research on it, because I think it's really interesting to see like published journals about the things you're passionate about.
Yeah, that was similar to what I was going to say, but to piggyback off of that, I mean, ideally the topic you chose is something that does genuinely interest you. And I think for me, even when, you know, the work was getting really hard and I was, spending a lot of time on it. It's like when you have that curiosity, it's like that will carry you really far because it's something you're invested in. You want to understand more. And really, once you've been working at it for a while, it's like you know this better than anyone else. And so I would find it to be helpful to just even I don't know, separately away from the paper, maybe write about where I think I'm at with understanding things. And if you listen to yourself, you really know more than you know about this. So, you got to trust yourself in the data and the information that you've been reading. So, yeah.
We're almost done, but I think we can do one more question. I thought there was somebody on this side.
Well, you guys all did really great. My question is for Sabrina, right? So you said that you like your sampling, you did it within your your network, and you also said that there were questions that you wish, or you could have asked different questions. I guess that's my question. What do you think, looking back on how you conducted your interview, you could have done different? And yeah, is there something that you think that was important to ask that maybe you missed?
Definitely. I was reading back my paper, and when I was looking over my questions again, I found that I was focusing too much on the mental health aspect instead of finding out why. No, I mean, like about the traditional values that a person could have grown up with. I didn't focus on their environment, asking about their environment. Again, sorry, this happens a lot. Um, so yeah, that's the one thing I was like, oh, I should have done that instead of I should have done this. So in that instance, I would say if you are doing interviews, make sure you carefully analyze them and figure out that this is what you want to ask and this is what will get you answers.
And just one more question to add to that. So, do you think that if you were to do the research again, your question would be the same, or would your research question maybe change, or your methods also?
I would just add more questions. I would just ask more because I know that I got pretty in-depth answers from my participants, but it's just not asking the right questions kind of threw me off. So yeah.
Thank you.
We probably can do one more. Is there somebody who didn't ask anything yet?
Hi, this question's for Eden again. I guess your topic we all find very interesting. Did you find much or anything related to players using voice changers? Because you had mentioned that players play with characters that don't necessarily match their voices, and or that players won't play with their mics on. But what about players who might use a voice changer to disguise their gender?
I actually didn't, so that's also something I can put into future research. I guess I didn't go into that because while I'm aware of it, I think it's something more streamers use, content-wise. Also for, when it comes to female gamers, also for protection, but it is a lot of the time used for content rather than protection, but it is something that I could put into future research.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Thank you to our amazing presenters. I am so proud of these folks. And thank you all for coming. Let's give them one more round of applause. And I'm sure they will be happy to answer any other questions you have. If you want to come say hi to them, feel free. Thank you, folks, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, pictures. Could you guys come? Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this absolutely fantastic HSS Student Expo, and I think we're the end of it, right? This is the last presentation of what has been 2 wonderful days, so thanks to the organizers of this. Jennifer. Thank you, and thank you for being so generous with my students and having them present. Very appreciated. So we just had a presentation that were my students from my communication research methods class, and now we're having students from my communication and identity class. I'm going to tell you the truth, as difficult as those presentations looked from last class, the presenters in this class have it even harder because the assignment is more difficult in one specific way, is that they had to come up with something out of nothing. So there's no literature review in these presentations. There is purely what these folks have observed and documented in terms of conversation. So the course is called Communication and Identity. And so what they are tasked to do, in this case, it was an asynchronous course online that they had to do a paper for. Some of my folks here today in the audience are students in my course this semester, which is an in-person course, and they're going to be doing their final project as a group project, but essentially the task is the same. And essentially they were tasked to find something that's interesting that's being done in conversation and show us what that looks like through transcribed conversations. So a very open-ended assignment. Unlike my presenters from my previous class. So thank you all for coming, and without further ado, let us get started. So this is called Communication, Identity Construction, and Relationship Maintenance in Everyday Talk. And in each of the papers that are presented, students delve deep into the analysis of naturally occurring conversations, and that's a key focal point in this class, is we're not talking about media, scripted conversations, we're talking about what do people sound like in everyday talk. And we're focusing on identity and relationships. These papers provide insight into what is the mundane and easily overlooked conversations that play an integral role in relationship maintenance. So we're grateful to have our presenters today. I am however, very sad to say that 2 of our presenters, because of scheduling conflicts that were outside of their control, were not able to present out of our 4. So Courtney and Cody are unfortunately not going to be here today, but I'm very happy to have Rula Fan and Tyra Sinanagic. So close. Sinanagic. That was the one. Sinanagic. And I was so happy to meet them today because this was the first time I've actually met them in person since it was an asynchronous course. So wonderful to have them here today. And without further ado, we'll invite Rula up here to present her paper. And Rula's paper is titled Building Intimate Relationships Through Language in Everyday Communication. So.
Hello. Building intimate relationships through language and everyday communication. Okay, to start, we're gonna, wait a minute. Hold on. These aren't the right ones. No.
Give us 1 second. So that'll be the other one then.
Okay. I think it's this.
Okay. Okay. Do you want this one?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Without further ado, Rula.
Yep. Okay. We're going to start with this quote. In this terrifying world, all we have are the connections we make. From BoJack Horseman. Right? This connects it with Dr. Kurla said with the mundane, the insignificant matter. Like, when we're all gone, the legacy we have is the impact we had on other people. And that's all we're going to have left. But to continue, our main characters, or our supporting characters. To start off, intimacy is not something that's strictly platonic or romantic. It's just a gauge with how close 2 people are in a relationship. So it doesn't have to be like, ooh, a steamy romance or like a really boring platonic friendship. And this is a type of relational message which is just how people express their feelings, both verbal and nonverbal. And both of these things can help show someone's personal identity, and a personal identity is what makes you you, like what makes you unique. So like your favorite food, your favorite music, like if you're boring, you're sad, you're funny. And the last one is commissives, which is my personal favorite, which are words that commit a speaker to doing a future act. So let's say we have like a party on Friday and I say, I will bring the food. So it's saying that I'm committing to this responsibility. And then our main characters of this are we talk and future talk. And we talk refers to when people in a relationship, both platonic and romantic, use specific pronouns like we, us, or our to describe themselves to describe their relationship. In a simpler way to understand this, imagine when like a couple is announcing their pregnancy and they say, we are pregnant, like they're both pregnant, but in actuality it's only one of them. And then the second one is future talk, which is when people in intimate relationships speak about their shared future together with confidence and like they know that they are going to be in each other's future. And to start off with the transcripts. So the things seen here are future talk, we talk, banter and teasing, and paralinguistic markers. So future talk can be seen here in the last line of person A when they say, I'll also argue about this with you when we're 30. To give context, the two people in this conversation were nowhere near 30. They weren't even 20 yet when they were having this conversation. So there's no business talking about like, oh, when we're 30, this inside joke is going to be relevant and I still will know you. And we talk could be like their shared future, like we're 30, like, you know. And then banter and teasing can be seen when person A says, maybe you don't like me after all. And outside of this conversation, it can be seen as an accusation like, oh, you've lied to me. You don't actually like me, you're posing. But person B knows that this is just how person A jokes. And they both have the shared understanding that person B does like person A, which is why it's like a safe subject for them to be joking about and for person A to make fun of. As well as the paralinguistic markers also show a close relationship with the dollar signs, which indicate that this is, well, they're smiley tones, that this is a pleasant conversation, it's funny, and they both know it's not a petty argument. And then the second transcript is a bit more complex in my opinion because it speaks more to tone and word choice. But seen here are directives, which is a way to get someone to do something else. And in this case, it's a direct directive, which is when the other person doesn't have to do any inferential work to what their conversational partner says. And this can be seen in the stressed syllables in person A's last line. Right now, he does not seem like a good option anymore, and this will not end well. This shows that they have a close, comfortable relationship to the point where person A can be this blunt and honest, and person B will not be offended by that. Because usually criticism can be seen as a way to belittle the other person, like, oh, I'm criticizing you, I'm giving you smack about something. And person A's personal identity can also be inferred about here when in their first line they say, I need to know that you will have a support system when I'm gone. This shows that person A deeply cares about person B because they are thinking ahead to the point where at some point I will not be here, whether it be I died or moved away, and I need to know that you will be okay about this current situation. And then the last transcript is my favorite, and it's also the catalyst, the thing that sparked this whole idea. It's the simplest transcript we have out of the three and in the whole bigger paper because we only have one side of a conversation, so like two pieces of dialogue, but we have the two main characters in this conversation. So future talk is obviously seen here when they say when we get married and the topic of children. And to give context around this couple, they are under 20 and have only been dating maybe 1 to 2 years. So they really should not be talking about marriage and children. That's just in my opinion. But person A speaks with confidence like, of course it's going to be you that I'm going to get married to, and of course I'm going to have children with you. Like, who else would it be? It's obviously only you. And then we talk can be seen, like, again, when we get married, and also our kids. So it shows that person A views person B as an equal in this partnership. Like, I will not just be doing childcare, you will not be be doing childcare. We're gonna do it together, because this is a team, we're a teamwork. This is gonna hold this apparent marriage together. And then, why does any of this matter? Realistically, this doesn't matter at all. This doesn't have an overarching effect on the world. My life didn't, well, actually it kind of did. Well, your lives won't be amazingly changed now that you know this exists, like the world's gonna be brighter or something. But this shows how the smallest words have the biggest impact, as mentioned earlier with the BoJack quote, like, the relationships we have matter, and again, going into the third bullet point, it has a deeper understanding of where we stand with other people, how other people feel about us, and who they are as a person. Do they care about me? Do they see me as an equal? Are they willing to put effort into this relationship? And finally, tell them how you feel. Even though the smallest words have the biggest impact, it's important to be very clear with how you feel about other people, and like, don't let them second guess where they stand with you. And then lastly, we have bonuses, but I don't know if we want to get into that. Sure? Okay. Video or the screenshot first? Anyone? Video? Oh, good. I like the video.
I have some news, George. Wonderful news.
We're going to watch the whole thing.
George? George?
So I feel like that was for a very obvious reason, our bloodline. Because realistically, they only really care about his bloodline because he's King George and they need to produce an heir, so she really doesn't matter. But it's still their bloodline because it's like, my blood is still within our grandchild. I also just wanted to include it. But it's a great show. And then I felt like that screenshot is very reminiscent of Transcript 3, but this time it has like a second person. So it's like, let's go the beach to your beach or mine, so they have two separate ones. And then this other person goes, our beach. And then the other one confirms our beach then. It sounds like from the Barbie movie. But this, in my head, it's like I'm grammatically saying there is no separation between you and I. It's just the two of us. And I thought that was really sweet. So yeah, I also want to include that one. Okay.
And after, since you only have two presenters, why don't you stay up there and you can ask questions now? And the presenters. So, does anybody have questions?
I do transcripts all the time, and I love them.
Yeah, I probably do. I do transcripts all the time, and I love them and use them constantly. So talk to me about the transcript coding that you used, if you wouldn't mind rolling back up to the very first of your transcripts. It included dollar signs and things of that kind. Talk to me about the meaning of those coding symbols for you first, and then I've got a second question.
Okay, so this is from the Tracy and Robles textbook. It's their transcription notation, so it helps, like, since it's a text, it helps distinguish tone, some facial expression, pauses, micro pauses, stuff like that.
So the dollar sign means what?
So the dollar sign are smiley tones, because you know when, like, oh, I can tell you're smiling when you're saying something, blah, blah, blah. And then the brackets are overlapping talk, so like if we're talking over each other, and the abrupt cutoff is pretty straightforward, an abrupt cutoff.
And then the commissives, the term commissives, if I've got it right, where do these? The first three are very easy, and most of us understand exactly what that is. But commissive is language that I'm unfamiliar with. Does it also come from this textbook?
Everything comes from that textbook. Yeah.
So it provided you with a language for understanding what was going on in the transcript, then.
Yes.
In some important. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically those who are in my class, do you want to say what a commissive is? Or taking the class right now? Come on, make me look good in front of Phil. What is a commissive? I know you know. I know you know.
A commissive would fall under a type of speech act, right?
Yeah.
What are some other speech acts? Sorry, I'm going to pop quiz my students. This is what you get when you give me extra time with a bunch of students. What's other speech acts? Come on, you folks know.
Directives.
Good. Anybody want to add any more?
An emotional avowalment.
Oh, good. I wasn't even thinking that one. That's great. Excellent. Good. I think we'll put you out of your misery, but thank you, folks, for doing it. Thank you for my students participating. But also, other questions for Rula? Beyonce.
I really loved your presentation. I'm kind of doing the same project with Professor Anastasia. Are there any tips you want to share with us to conduct this project like you did? It was really beautiful. I really liked it.
Wait, what? Sorry.
Do you have any tips, like how you did the project that you want to share with us?
Oh, like my process of doing it and also coming up with the idea. The idea came up really last minute because I remember I emailed her like I think a week or two before the actual thing was due. I was like, which one do you think is a better idea? This one or this one? She was like, oh, this one's better. And I was like, sick, okay. And then the other tip I really have is to just listen to what other people are talking about, even if it's just passive communication or just passive conversation. Like with the catalyst, the last one, I wasn't even part of that conversation. He was talking to his girlfriend. It was like a three-way conversation. And I remember he said, oh, when we have our children, I just sort of went, oh, that's very interesting. That's an interesting thing to think about because I can't even, I'm trying to figure out how to pay taxes. He's already trying to figure out children, and he's only a year older than me. It's just like, I wouldn't say think very technical, just think more emotionally.
Thank you.
And I love in that transcript, the silence is so powerful. Mm-hmm. You stole my question, by the way. That's what I was going to ask.
I'm asking, in terms of future talk, you were saying, I think you were using it a lot in regards to like a relationship like this, but what about like with a more professional relationship? Would you also use future talk with like a boss? Would you say, I can't wait to get a raise or something like that? I don't know.
I think, okay, so I only did these about relationships because, I was also thinking about doing it in a more professional sense because we talk, you can hear a lot of like public speakers and politicians use it, like when there's like a really big issue, or like when the president addresses the nation, he goes, "My fellow Americans, we will get through this together." When in reality, he's not really going through anything, you know? So it's like, it helps you seem more personable, it helps you more relatable, more persuasive. And Future Talk, I never thought about it in a future, in like a professional sense. In my head, I do agree with what you said, like, I can't wait to get a raise, because then in my head, it's also like a form of manifesting, you know? So it's just like wishing things into existence maybe as well.
Right. Thank you.
And there will be opportunity to ask more questions at the end for both presenters. But anybody else want to ask another question? Why don't we then move on to our next presenter? Thank you, Ruler. And our next presenter, while they're getting their presentation ready, is Tyra Sinanagich. Her presentation is titled Discovery of Identity Throughout Language Barrier Experiences. I love that title. That's so cool. Thank you.
First of all, I want to welcome everybody here. Thank you for joining us in this moment. I appreciate it a lot. This is my fun topic, Discovery of Identity Throughout Language Barrier Experiences. So let's start with, what are language barriers? So language barriers is the inability of communication between the messenger and receiver due to different native spoken languages. Hello, test one, two. And why is this so important? It's something that we don't really think about, but we come across every day, especially living in New York City. So that's where I came with the idea to do language barrier experiences in retail stores. That's where it happens every day. That's where retail associates experience it, customers experience it, as many people do not speak English as well. So I conducted 4 interviews where we have 2 experiences of 2 bilingual retail associates and 2 experiences of only English-speaking retail associates, where all 4 are encountering non-English speaking customers or they speak very little of English. So with the first 2 interviews, we have the 2 bilingual retail associates. Here we have the conversation questions and as well the transcription system that was talked about earlier as well, that is from the book. So in these first questions here, it's about asking Brandon, who's bilingual in English and Spanish, how does he feel when he encounters a customer that doesn't speak either of his languages, and how does he solve or help them in those situations? And he explains how he either gets somebody else to help him, or he actually finds a solution where he shows with his hands, hand gesture. Then we can see about his identity, Brandon's identity from that conversation, that the speech genre between me and him is friendly manner, as he keeps saying, you know, he's very casual in the conversation. He doesn't feel like he's pressured into answering these questions. So we move on to the discourse marker that I just now mentioned, you know, which is a way of altercasting, which is him acknowledging that I might be aware of the situations or experiences that he goes through, as we are both retail associates. Then we have adjacency pair, which is just a way of representing the relationship or the conversation that we are having. And in this actually pair, we have Brandon and a non-English speaking customer, where it's invitation and acceptance. What that means is a customer approaches, that's the invitation to Brandon, and Brandon accepts it. Even though he might not speak their language, he will still find a way how to solve his solution, how to solve his problem, not solution. So as I mentioned, the hand gestures, they show the customers the price. Those are, as with this quote explained, set of gestures that convey liking and interest, nonverbal immediacy. So that would mean that even though he might not speak their language, he's still showing with his hands. He's showing that he's interested in engaging with the customer and conversing as the same way customers are still feeling free to express themselves without even speaking English. The next question we have is again from a bilingual retail associate, but here I ask her, does she feel a special connection if a customer who does speak Spanish to her, like a connection to her roots, connection to her heritage? In her conversation or answer, we can see that at first she's admitting that she doesn't have a problem with that. If she notices like an accent, she will talk to the customers in Spanish. But then after, again, I ask her if it gives her a special connection, she starts off in a refusal manner, like saying it doesn't, but then proceeds as if she's making a realization during her own response, saying that I guess it gives me a connection. Because she's like still thinking about it. It's like you take a moment to realize what's actually going on between that conversation of you and the customer. And that's where she does say that she feels that she's acknowledged or that she's connected to her roots. So that reveals about Jade's identity. I'm so sorry. She's using also a lot of speech tics, such known as like. That's very often between the younger generations. Every other sentence is with using the like speech tic as a way of not saying constantly um. But it also can mean uncertainty because you're not sure still what you want to answer, but you want to seem always as if you're engaging with the person. Then again, the mentioning of it doesn't is a stressed utterance, but then she proceeds in a calm voice, showing a little bit doubt with the I guess, and then she comes to the realization that she definitely is connected to her roots when she speaks with a customer that speaks Spanish. And then this is a new term here that I haven't mentioned, which is group vitality was in danger at some point. So group vitality is like think of it as like endangered species that you don't have control of having something taken away from you, but you're still like, in a way, dying out. So that's how it was for Jade as she encountered more English-speaking customers. She discovered that it was endangered as soon as she got approached by a Spanish speaking customer, and that made her feel like rekindled to her roots back again. So that's a really nice connection that she shows here within her identity and conversation. Next, we have the first only speaking English retail associate, and her question was, does she feel threatened or if she feels like scared if she's approached by customers that don't speak English at all, because that is her group vitality, where she only speaks English. In her lengthy response, which I really love, she's one of my friends, Michaela goes on and goes on about how she feels guilty. She doesn't feel threatened and she just keeps feeling guilty. She feels bad. She feels like she can't help the customers. And from that, we reveal about Michaela's identity, that she also uses the speech tics like providing uncertainty, but also possibility of her feeling uncomfortable for not being able to talk to the customers. Then we have a unique example, again, a new term of face and face threat. So having a face is just representing, let's say, your identity, but through verbal and nonverbal aspects, in a way of you in a way of you just maintaining that social image. In her case, she was having a face threat, but I would like to call it a self threat, as she was saying to herself that she feels bad. Maybe the customers didn't even think that she was doing so bad or that she wasn't being helpful. She was just facing that threat to herself. And that's another way also of altercasting, because again, as if she's still feeling that she's not helpful, one might think she's doing an amazing job. She's being very aware and socially aware and empathetic to the customers instead of focusing on herself, being more confident and all that. And the last case we have is Melanie. Melanie, you can see that the conversation is pretty short, from which one might think that she wasn't really engaging in this conversation, but that's the fun part of this interview, is that once we find out about her identity is that adjacency pair is of questioning and straightforward responding without too much engagement. She was straightforward. Oh my God. She was straightforward. And it might even seem that it was a cold answer, as if she didn't feel comfortable with answering, but she was actually just busy. And that's the pattern that we can notice in Melanie's identity, is that she could be misperceived in all of this. I actually really like doing the interview with her because of that misperception, because her face is very positioned and she's very stable. She doesn't feel threatened that the customers who approach her who don't speak English, she just doesn't help them. She finds a translator and that's all she does. But she's confident in that. So that gives her credibility because she's defending her face. But it also gives her a face threat because it might seem that she's inconsiderate. She's not considering other languages, other cultures, other anything, even though it's just her maybe being busy. And that's where we come to the whole end of this presentation, is what are the patterns that we noticed through all the 4 interviews. For Brandon's, we had solution using hand gestures. For Jade, we have connection to her roots. For Michaela, we had social awareness, constantly feeling empathy and bad for others. And lastly, for Melanie and her misperception, because one might think of her being confident, one might think of her not being friendly as much. And that would be it. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I would love to take some questions for our wonderful speaker.
I just wanted a confirmation because I thought it was really interesting. So you yourself can be your own face threat, correct?
That wasn't specifically discussed in the book, but I believe in a way that Michaela did it herself. It seemed like it could be a new term maybe discovered as a self-threat. You're not protecting your own identity or that what social image you want. You're even harming that yourself.
Mm. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. Else has questions?
Well, I think.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So would you say that like the self-threat was almost like correlated to being insecure within the situation?
I would say that, yes, because that's literally all the thing that I was explaining, her just being bad and having that social awareness instead of thinking confidently about herself. So it's that emotion and feeling of just being insecure.
Oh, thank you.
What tips would you, I'm going to steal Beyonce's question. What tips do you have for our folks in the class who are going to be doing this presentation, their own project this semester?
For the tips, I would definitely say that it's important to find a topic that is interesting to you, that you might see every day, because as Rula said herself, I did this last minute, I'm not even gonna lie. But it was something that I was most curious about too, because I myself am like a bilingual, almost multilingual too. So I face it with myself and then with these customers, and I see how I try to help them, understand them. Sometimes you don't even communicate. You don't use words to even talk to these customers. I was like, that's a pretty interesting conversation, you know? So why not do this topic too?
Other questions? I think on the one hand, my students that are here are like, oh, everything clicked now. Like, oh, this is what she's expecting from us. I finally get it. And on the other hand, I think they're all terrified because then they just also realized, oh, wait, this is what she expects from us. Does that encapsulate the emotion going on right now in this audience? Any questions from anybody for our wonderful presenter, for either of our presenters? I wanted to mention, for those who are not aware of it, that the book is called Everyday Talk, by Karen Tracy and Jessica Robles, and the method that they're using is discourse analysis, and the conversation transcription system that they used is called, is a conversation analytic one, which is a transcription system not just used in the book, but also just used in that field in general. And I want to say how hard it is, as my students who are in this class, and certainly the presenters, know to take an objective stance looking at conversation. We take it for granted every day, and so being able to actually look at the conversation is really difficult. I'll ask the presenters, how did you find that experience of trying to, like, especially you knew the people, both of you knew the people, how did you feel trying to be objective using conversation from people that you knew, you know their whole backstory?
That's a really good question. I'd say that it kind of made it easier, but at the same time, it was like, I hope they don't say the wrong words while I'm doing this interview in this audio and transcription system. Even though I was wanting to have that conversation very natural, I didn't want them to feel pressure. I didn't want to make them feel like, oh, I'm being interviewed. I just wanted to have a very friendly manner. As you can see, the responses were really lengthy too, which took so much time to even transcript it. But I'd say it's a fun experience that everybody should go through, because you don't even think about these things until you take a class like this. And it really shows you how to be more aware of everything in communication.
I found it really hard to be objective. Not in the specific ones shown up there. It's not as, my analysis isn't as like subject. It's more actually analytical. But a lot of the other transcripts I have in my paper, you can tell I have a very obvious opinion about how I felt about what some of the other people said and about how the other person was. So I found it really hard because you have the actual other context of the conversation, and you can only put like 4 or 5 turns on there. So then also having to segment your conversation down into something that'll fit your topic is really hard as well.
I have one more question, but if somebody else has any. One of the things that I find interesting about the class is everybody I'm going to take a class on communication and identity, and I'm going to talk all about all the things I love about, my identity and the things I hate about my identity, and folks think that it's going to be kind of this self-reflective kind of self-help class, which it is decidedly not. I think we can agree on that. So in the end, did you folks get out of it what you thought you were going to? Something worse, something better, something different? So that's my question. I'll have you go first.
It did feel like I became bilingual because, like, yeah, I'm still speaking English, but it's also like I understand. Or at least I'm more observant and cognizant of the word choices people use towards me, towards other people, and then I now have the foresight to go, maybe they're not the best person, or I should flag that, or like, that's a good quality.
For myself, I would say that, this class did taught me, as I once again mentioned, to be more aware. Before, I was always focused on just practicing my English so it's perfect, almost kind of forgetting my own native language. But then as I worked with people that don't speak English at all for so many years of living in the US, I was like, so I don't really need to get rid of my language just to sound perfect to others. I can just use universal words that anybody can understand. Like, I don't know, in sales, it's probably something like bonus, gratis, I don't know, all those fun little words that can just click in anybody's mind, doesn't matter what language you speak. And then it's like, it gives you a good life skill. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. Anybody else questions? Otherwise, Thank you, folks, very much to our wonderful, wonderful presenters. And once again, congratulations to Jennifer for a successful event. Yay!